So my topic is resource dependency theory. The document that I chose to analyze most closely is going to be the lessons from resource dependence theory for contemporary public and nonprofit management by Malatesta and Smith. And so one of the key things that really stuck with me about resource dependency theory is this idea that agencies are interdependent, but also in competition for limited resources. So my experience in state government has definitely, borne that out. That um, for every dollar that defects gets, for example, some other agency, Department of Corrections, is going to get less. So how can we analyze that theoretical framework and what can we take away from it? So resource dependency theory kind of has like a working definition. So Malatesta breaks it down into three principles. So first, an organization needs resources to survive and pursue its goals. We know that those resources tend to be finite, and they tend to come from outside of the organization as a whole. Second, an organization can obtain resources from its environment or more simply from other organizations. So they can either be appropriated resources, right? Typically by politicians, legislatures, or they can get those, source those from other organizations through interagency cooperation. Third, power and its inverse, dependence, play key roles in understanding interorganizational relationship. So he goes on to say, they go on to say, this last principle implies that the balance of power usually favors the organization that possesses what other organizations need. So there is this idea of interdependence, but there's also this power dynamic at play. So the organization that has um, resources is in the dominant position. So the power of the people, the politicians, and the pocketbook. So when we're talking about resources, it's important to analyze um, what resources are, right? Because what a resource means to me may be different than what a resource means to you. So when we're talking about a theoretical framework applicable to public administration, there are a couple things that we can consider um, resources. So resources include money, manpower, organizational independence. Everyone knows that resource equates money in government and public administration, but we often discount manpower. So one of the big things that has been a challenge in my own personal career with the state of Georgia has been retention. You can have all of the money in the world, but if you can't get people to stay in their jobs um, due to maybe they're too demanding, um, maybe the pay isn't what it should be, there are all these extenuating factors, then your organizational success and longevity will be negatively affected. Um, the third one there, organizational independence. So we think a lot of organizations as these sort of linear bodies, but what resource dependency theory communicates, in my view, is that uh, organizations are shaped from the inside and the outside. So that organizational independence can drive um, its own self in a way and can help to shape the outcomes of the organization. So every dollar that a government or an entity invests in an organization um, is an investment. There's an expectation that that resource will then be transferred to um, whatever the target audience is. So if that's um, in my instance, I work for the Division of Family and Children's Services. So, we tend to transmit resources to low-income families via benefit programs, right? It's just a singular example. Um, but there is this expectation that organizations prove their worth. So as government balloons and bureaucracy gets ever more complicated and interconnected, and agencies begin to overlap, which we'll talk about a little bit more later on, you agencies are starting to find that they need to fight to prove that they are worth the investment. Um, Agencies, even at local and state levels, budgets have ballooned, to, sometimes tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars. And taxpayers are becoming more critical of what organizations are doing with that funding. So, um, yes, money is a big part of it, but you can't discount manpower and organizational independence. So, a contemporary take. If we apply the lens of resource theory through the lens of, uh, or excuse me, if we apply resource theory and look at it through the lens of the contemporary political landscape in the United States, what we can see is that there is a focus on doing more with less, right? That's something that anybody who works in government at any level has heard multiple times, I'm sure, that we have to do more with less. We need to be efficient. We need to be lean. Even as agencies grow, organizations grow, there still is this focus on measurable outcomes, right? So, are we taking those resources and transferring them in an effective and efficient way? Um, So yes, budgets have ballooned. Organizations certainly have more at their disposal than they have had before, but they also have larger lists of necessities. So organizations, agencies are tasked with more things than they were previously. So just to give you an example, um, in the Division of Family and Children's Services, there are different offices. So you have the Office of Family Independence, child support. You have child protective services, adult protective services. The list goes on and on and on. And we all share a singular budget, um, and we all have to sort of prove our worth to to get that allocation each year, right? And so we also have an overlap. We have federal agencies who do things similarly to state agencies, um, who do things similar to local agencies. Think the Department of Education and the State Department of Education and your local Board of Education. So all of these agencies are interdependent. They rely on each other. Funding comes through the federal level to the state level to the local level. Um, but there is some competition there. Maybe not in the Department of Education, but certainly in the case study that we referenced here, um, the Department of Labor, we saw some overlap with the Department of Education, Veterans Affairs, right? These different organizations who have the same or similar target audiences, um, pulling resources away from each other, essentially to reach the same goal, right? So endurance of the efficient. So what are the benefits of resource dependency as a theory? Um, the first thing is that it can create healthy competition, innovation, and build interagency relations. So one of the keys to longevity um, that Malatesta talks about is the role of the environment and how interconnectedness refers to the degree to which organizations are linked in an overall system. Um, and there are three characteristics of that. So that's concentration, um, forgive me if I pronounce this wrong, munificence, and interconnectedness. So concentration refers to the degree to which authority and power are dispersed within the environment. Munificence refers to the scarcity of critical resources. Um, and interconnectedness refers to the degree to which organizations are linked in an overall system. So as we continue to build our current framework out, we can see some real benefits in creating competition between agencies, um, and for different agencies to come together to share common goals and resources, right? There's also room for managers to think critically. Um, they have to analyze their programs, analyze their workforce, and to, really examine if what they're doing is working. There are a few drawbacks, perhaps, to resource dependency theory. Um, Number one is that some organizations are going to be vested with more power. They're going to have all the power, right? These tend to be your big overarching agencies, your federal agencies, that sort of dictate what state and local agencies are responsible for doing. There's also a limited choice of structure. So organizations tend to have to mirror other organizations in order to be successful, in order to gain legitimacy and resources. Um, Also, the criticality of resources. We live in a finite environment. Money, manpower, they're not unlimited resources. So where there is overlap, there's also going to be competition for those resources. There's also going to be a limited alternative for resources. When we talk about public administration and the job that administrators do, there really isn't an alternate source of funding for the common good, right? There are no other means, to get the funding you need to ensure the welfare and safety of all of the children in the state of Georgia, except from the government. And so it does create a limited alternative for resources. There's also some organizational discretion. Organizational discretion, you can tie that with managerial discretion, um, and leadership can make a difference. Um, Organizational framework can make a difference in the success and longevity of an organization. So, an alternative theory would be Fiedler's contingency theory. So, contingency theory tends to be less focused on the environment, less focused on resources, more focused on the leader, more focused on your least preferred coworker, right? Your LPC, um, and more focused on organizations as structures that are made up of individuals rather than structures that are products of their environment. So it tends to pit a task-oriented leadership style against a relationship oriented leadership style. And again, what it's highlighting there is the difference at its core between uh, what is considered important, right? In contingency theory, the focus is on the leader as a driver of an organization versus an organization as a rider in the car that is allocation, interagency dependence, and so on. So some final points and takeaways that I want to leave you with is that resource dependency theory really is, in my view, um, a strategy that public administrators can employ um, to look at the work that they do and how they're able to do the work through a theoretical lens, right? We all know that resources have to come from somewhere and we have to account for those resources. But having a theory like resource dependency theory really puts into perspective the nuance of government in the modern age, and public administration in the modern age. Certainly, there are tasks um, challenges, right? Um, but I think that overall, this is a great theory for uh, examining the field of public administration.